Okay, chapter 4, elasticity. In the last chapter, we looked at when supply decreases, the equilibrium price will rise or increase. Okay, but does the price rise by a large amount or did it rise by a small amount? Or did it barely rise at all? How could we quantify? We couldn't. The answer is going to depend on how responsive that change was. And when we talk about how responsive that change was, we're going to refer to how elastic it was. When I talk about elastic, think of waistbands. When we leave Thanksgiving, what's happening to our waistbands?
Stretching.
They're stretching, they're expanding. So the response changed to what we ate at Thanksgiving. That's the responsiveness. And again, when we're getting ready for beach wear, we might try the opposite approach. Or if the doctor tells us we need to, we might receive, if we're on a weight loss and we start to decrease the weight, again, that's the responsiveness. All right, so I'm going to start with the price elasticity of demand, and that is what we just recorded. So how do we say the price elasticity of demand? How do we solve for it? We say that it is a units-free measure of the responsiveness of the quantity demanded of a good to the change in its price when all other influences on buying remain the same. And we calculate the price elasticity of demand using this formula. Now I'm going to quickly show, everyone knows the percent sign. Everyone see this, Greek symbol for delta. It represents change. D for demand. So the percent change in demand divided by the percent change in price. And let's look at figure 4.1. What are we solving for here?
The price elasticity of demand for
What? And quantity demanded.
10, 11.
All right, and we see a curve. Something's going to look like this. So here is our demand curve. And we're going to use this point. So here's our initial price. $20.50. I'll probably draw that a little right there. So at $20.50, how many pizzas are being demanded? 9 pizzas are being demanded. Now, if the price of pizza suddenly falls to $19.50 and the quantity demanded increases to what? 11. So we're going to say at $19.50, $11 pizzas are being demanded. The average price is $20 and the average quantity demanded is 10 pizzas. So at 20, so there's our average price. So how would we solve the price elasticity of demand? What was the percent change in price, in demand? Let's start with the numerator.
The change in price was $1. And then the change in demand was 2 pizzas.
Okay, but now remember, percent.
So 2 divided by 10 times 100,
Which gives me,
20%.
so we have a 20% change in demand. And we solve that by 2 divided by 10 multiplied by 100. Now what's the percent change in price? So I'll put it over.
So $1 divided by 20 times 10, or times 100.
$1 divided by 20, which gives me
5%.
5%. Thank you. Now, if I divide this, what do I get?
4%.
4%. Nothing tricky here. So what does this tell me? This gives me what? Why is this important for me to quantify?
Is it the average price and quantity?
So this is going to be my average price in quantity. So this 4, we're going to assign it up here. And let me say that when we are solving, if you come up, remember we said it was a units-free form of measurement. Let's talk about a minus sign. If you do solve for this, and you come up with a negative number, I want you to ignore the negative and ignore the minus sign. We're only concerned with the magnitude of the change, not whether or not it's positive or negative. We can look at the curve and distinguish that, but if you come up with a negative here, remember, ignore the minus sign. All right, when we say something is inelastic, so let's talk about inelastic demand, unit elastic, and let's look at a inelastic demand. When we say that an item has inelastic demand, this becomes my demand curve. So we're gonna have a sky forward, sky upward, vertical demand curve. What would elasticity equal here? It's going to equal 0. There is no responsive change. So quantity demanded remains the same regardless of price. So this item is inelastic. Who can think of an inelastic item?
So are you saying that the price will remain the same regardless of what it is, correct?
Correct. So what would be an
So
example?
would that be like gas? Well, no, I guess gas would remain the same, but the demand would remain the same.
You know, it'd be interesting. I mean, at what point would we start to measure elastic demand out of gasoline? And I remember maybe, at what time period was it when gasoline prices were nearing $5? And I remember traveling at that time, and I remember being down in the Smoky Mountains, Tennessee and North Carolina. I remember spending $5 for gasoline then. I remember in Hawaii spending nearly 10. And here, even in southern Indiana, like I said, we were nearing $5. That was probably back 2005, 2006, somewhere around that time period. And I remember I had a theory that we would start to see elasticity around $5. I really thought that would be it. $5 would be the tipping point for us here locally. And we hit $5. And when we hit $5 that year, I remember a headline that more Americans were driving than ever. So yes, gasoline probably up to a certain point, but I do know if gasoline prices continue to rise, $10 to $20 a gallon, there'd be a lot more of us walking. I don't expect we could ever do this, but just think if we could ever quantify and put a price on the oxygen we breathe or the water we need to drink. Those would be items that we'd be forced to pay regardless at any price. So something that is a bare necessity, that is a requirement for life, would have more inelastic demand.
What about like an iPhone?
Did you say an iPhone?
Yeah.
Yes, to some individuals, that is a necessity for life.
But I mean, the price really doesn't change on an iPhone based on demand. Apple never changes their price.
But I mean, would the price of an iPhone, if the price of an iPhone rose to $2,000,
Yeah.
what would happen to demand?
Down.
I would like to think demand would decrease. But I would agree too, probably like gasoline, it might be inelastic up to a certain point.
Right.
We'll see. They're going to have a lot of hype right now with the 10th anniversary and the 10th model coming out next year. Let's see how they price that.
10 grand.
Probably
Yeah,
will offer a gold-plated $10,000 model. All right, now if the percentage change in the quantity demanded equals percentage change in price. So here we're going to draw another curve. And we say that elasticity is equal to 1. This is gonna say that the percent change in quantity demanded is equal to the percent change in price. So here we would call this unit elastic. So when solving, if you get price elasticity of 1, we're going to say it's unit elastic. And just know that for every percent increase in demand, it's going to equal the percent increase in price. So they're going to move in tandem. What would I call this demand curve?
Perfectly elastic demand.
Perfectly elastic. So here, the percent change in the quantity demanded is infinitely large as the price barely changes. And we say that this is perfectly elastic demand. And if you look at figure 4.2, part C in your text, it's going to show this. Now again, factors that influence the elasticity of demand. Substitutes. We're going to see something similar to the income effect, but the proportion of income spent on that good is going to affect the price elasticity of demand. And finally, the time elapsed since a price change. So closest to substitutes. The closer the substitute, the more elastic we find. Necessities, food and housing generally have inelastic demand. Remember, items that are required for life, we say generally have inelastic. Luxuries such as vacations and exotic luxuries, we're going to say do have elastic demand. If our income rose proportionately, the responsiveness of the demand off of those items, we would definitely see an elastic effect. Proportion of income spent on the good. All right, the greater the proportion of income consumers spend on the good, the larger is the price elasticity. So think right now of what, let's strip out housing, and let's go ahead and strip out your transportation cost. And when I say that, if you're making a car, if you have a car loan or an auto loan, ignore that. Think of your household's largest expense. And imagine how you would respond to a change in price. So the more income that you would spend on that item, the greater the responsiveness or the greater the elasticity. Time elapsed. The more time consumers have to adjust to a price change, or the longer that a good can be stored without losing its value, the more elastic is the demand for that good. So the more time consumers have to adjust to a price change, you know, in my industry, I always think of insurance rates. And let's go back to the auto and the home. You know, with requiring any upgrades or any changes to the risk, your automobile insurance rates are set once a year. Your homeowner's insurance premium is set once a year. So every year, when you change that, you've got to wait 1 year. So are you gonna be more elastic to any change in price? All right, we're gonna get back to making pizzas here. All right, so five, and we're at 0.50. So, all right, so let's imagine this. This is my midpoint, and I'm going to talk about changes along the demand curve from up in the left quadrant down to the midpoint, and then from the midpoint down to here. We're going to see elastic up here, inelastic down here. And let's start making some pizzas now. All right, so if the price falls, let's talk about, yeah, we're gonna make pizzas. All right, if the price falls from 25 to 15, so 15 is gonna be somewhere right in here. So if the price falls from 25 to 15, and we say at $25, how many is being demanded? 0. All right, now what happens when we go down to $15?
20 pizzas are demanded.
20?
Call that 20. Questions?
Yeah, okay, so you have is it because the demand is higher that it is elastic versus here where it's inelastic? Is that the?
Well, right now, I don't even want you to, we'll get into this here in a second, but right now, let's focus on the elasticity piece. We're saying this is elastic demand. Because as price lowered, we saw responsiveness. And what happened?
Increase
What increased?
the demand or the
You said demand, so the
Yeah.
quantity demanded, because at 25 we were at 0.
Mm.
And and now lowering the price to 15, demand just increased from 0 to 20. All right, now, if the price fell from 10 to 0, so if the price falls from 10 to 0, what's going to happen to quantity demanded? And I'm going to say that this comes out to equal 30. Now, if I lower the price to 0, how much is being demanded? 50. Okay, now remember, I could apply this formula here, and I could solve for price elasticity of demand using these two changes in price, two examples of changes in price. All right, now the last formula I would show when we talk about the income elasticity of demand. So the income elasticity of demand is going to measure quantity demanded and how it responds to a change in income. So now we're going to measure elasticity as it only relates to income. Don't let it trip you up. We're going to apply the formula, the change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in income. And we say that if income elasticity of demand is greater than 1, how do we interpret that? We say that it is income elastic and it is a normal good. If the income elasticity of demand is between 0 and 1, how do we interpret that? Bless you. Between 0 and 1, we say it is income inelastic. And finally, if it's less than 1, we say it is an inferior good. Let's look at figure 4 or 5. What do we have going on in figure 4 or 5?
Increasing the quantity of pieces demanded when the price of a burger rises.
decrease in the quantity of pizza demanded when the price of a soft drink rises. It also shows the quantity of pizza demanded when the price of a burger rises. Now, what is a burger to a pizza?
Substitute.
A substitute. And what is a soft drink to a pizza? A complement. Okay,